Welcome to tonight's JayTalk. We're trying a new format. Tonight we're going to do a fireside chat. So the most important thing to ask of our live audience, which is also new, is if we have flames shooting out of our heads, would you please tell us so that we move our head? Okay, this way? Better? Okay. All right, so what we'll do this evening then is we will have this conversation about interdisciplinary leadership. Then we will have a reminder about registration, I think was the hot topic, just to be watching for emails from Shannon. And then 3, take questions and answers from the audience and from the chat if you're online. So here we go. All right. So Dr. Bloomquist, tell me about the interdisciplinary project you took part in that you are most proud of.
I would say one of the projects that I'm most proud of that included interdisciplinary practices was a project called Health Promoting Schools that I was part of, which included the health region, which I was working at, and the school divisions, multiple school divisions, so a Catholic school division and a public school division in the community in which I was working. Part of that Health Promoting Schools initiative was also getting community partners involved to come into the schools to support the schools. So it required a lot of partnerships across multiple disciplines trying to understand each other. So we were talking about health in schools for children, which are our future, right? And so the community and the industries in the community were also involved in trying to help promote that.
So tell me about how you went about building those partnerships.
A lot of the partnerships were built before I started on the project, but I know listening to the stories of the beginning of the project, there were meetings to have meetings. We've talked about this before. To really try to come together, bring everybody to the table with their strengths, and trying to use their resources in the most effective way. So there were a lot of conversations, a lot of dialogue, a lot of clarifying of kind of goals, like what is health promoting schools? What does it mean when we promote health in schools and have the students in the schools do activities that are curricular or co-curricular or outside of the curriculum. And there was a lot of clarifying from what I was told in the beginning. And then once the initiative got off the ground and everybody kind of knew where they were, and there was a lot of just action. You know, it's the contemplation and action. It's like, we know what our goals are, we know who's around the table, go.
Okay, so what kinds of resources did the various partners bring, or give a couple of examples?
Sure. So from my angle, so I was a health promoter at the time, health educator, we brought our understanding of what little bodies most need throughout a day. So we were talking about physical activity, we were talking about healthy eating, we were talking about mental health in the school. So we brought that, the information, the knowledge route, the appropriate initiatives for K-12 students. The schools brought their understanding of the structure of the school environment and what they could and couldn't do, what time frames they needed us to do things in. We partnered a lot with helping the teachers in the classrooms, or the principals, or the vice principals, or the physical educators to try to carry that out throughout the day when we weren't there as well. Industry partners provided a lot of money.
Okay.
Right. They knew it, they saw it as an investment, and they brought the funds that were needed for events that we would host, and food. We did a lot around coming together. Like, we would invite parents to certain things, we would entice them with food, and so we needed funds to do the food. And so there was community partners, especially in the industry, like in Saskatoon where I was working. It was very agriculture, and so there was lentil farmers that donated a whole bunch of lentils, and we did lentil lasagna and lentil cookies and all these kind of things to talk about healthy eating and cooking and baking together. So it was certainly a partnership, but it was interdisciplinary in many ways.
Tell me some of the challenges you faced because it was interdisciplinary.
Personal. So a personal challenge was just having to go to so many meetings. And there were times when it was challenging to communicate. Like
Okay.
the terminology used. I think the work that the partners did at the beginning, the practitioners on the ground weren't necessarily at those meetings. Those were higher level meetings. But then when the practitioners together, so teacher and a health educator and agriculture in the classroom person came together, we were like, well, what did they agree to? And it's like, well, we're doing kind of the initiative on the ground kind of agreement and understanding how to do that together and finding the right common ground to then go, okay, yes, here's the event that we're going to put on together, and here's how we're going to share this with the schools in that way. So repeating yourself a lot, clarifying your communication. We talked about that today with writing, right? But we then learned a lot about each other and our shared passion. We all had a passion for helping our children and youth be healthy and prepared for their full life of citizenship.
Did the partnership continue after that project?
Yeah, it's still going.
So what are some of the other projects that they did? Do you know?
Oh no, they're still doing health promoting schools.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean the health promoting schools initiative is still going.
Tell me about the outcomes you had from the project.
Oh, that evaluation is always a tough part of interdisciplinary work, I think, and because we all are interested. So for the schools, they're interested still in that students are learning something along the way. We are, as a health promotion unit and a health region, we are interested in health outcomes, and industry leaders are interested in how do I say? They're interested in the image that they get of them
Building corporate goodwill.
Right, in some ways, right? But because there's a longer term thing, because these are not purchasers yet, the
right.
Students necessarily, but they are potential workers, employees. So there's a longer term. I mean, all of us have a long term vision of it, but so we all had different outcomes, and trying to, it's a lot to try to measure all of those, and that was a major part of the initiative that is still ongoing right now.
Was that a kind of project you could have done without it being interdisciplinary?
Health promoting schools? No, I don't think so.
So it naturally lent itself to that.
Well, when we leave a complex issue like the health of our children, so you use the quote from whomever is attributed to, the community that raises the children, right? Whoever that quote is from. When it's a complex issue like this, you need to keep the complexity in it and not try to, let's put it all on education. There's the ones, we send them there, they should be healthy for that whole time. And it's like, well, we all have a part to play in that. And so there are times when we try to use a siloed approach to addressing a complex issue as that. But I think when we attempted an initiative, a solution that kept the complexity, which takes the work, we then were doing interdisciplinary work. And all of us were then practicing interdisciplinary leadership, I hope.
That was going to be my next question. So what's the difference between interdisciplinary partnerships and interdisciplinary leadership? Or is there one?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I would say, I mean, I don't know the answer, but if I were to attempt to kind of piece it apart a little bit, I would say interdisciplinary partnerships require interdisciplinary leadership to be as successful as they could be, because so my philosophy is we are all leaders and we're leading all of the time, right? So if you're in an interdisciplinary partnership and you're not recognizing the complexity, the ambiguity, the need for shared responsibility and accountability, and the need to find common ground and find third ways, then you're certainly not practicing leadership, and it may impact the partnerships then. So I think interdisciplinary leadership, that ability to hold that ambiguity, the ability to enter into and be willing to and ready to communicate, again, clarify, again, be open to asking questions when you need, all of those interdisciplinary practices that we talk about throughout the program helps to then keep that interdisciplinary partnership together and healthy to be able to achieve those long-term goals.
So, for the benefit of our audience, where is leadership then?
Where is leadership?
Is it something that is separate from the group? Is it something that emerges from the group? Is it something that morphs through the group?
Now you are challenging me to know and understand all of your team's stuff. You answer that question.
I don't even know.
You're setting me up.
I'm not setting you up. You have good answers for this.
But what? Wait. Okay, you start. What would you say?
It seems to me, given the setup of your example,
yeah,
that leadership is moving among those partners.
Oh, okay.
That it emerges at different times among different people.
Yeah.
And it's not just residing in one person's position.
Yeah, and I talk a lot about it when I talk about power, right? That power flows through the different people at different times and where is authority located, and I like to decentralize authority and have power. Yeah, so yeah, I definitely think that it's certainly, and in the health promoting schools example, I witnessed and I was part of that on a regular basis, because we had myself as a health educator, but we also had public health nurses that were the center points in the schools that were working with the principals, and they were sharing power. And at different times, at different events, then we would definitely put our industry partners front and center so that they can get the publicity that they wanted. And so then they had the power at that moment and stuff like that. So we were definitely using it and locating it in different places at different times based on the context of the situation that was needed.
I knew you knew that answer.
Well, you should have said something about where's power?
Where's power?
Yeah.
It's another way of asking power.
Yeah, but you said where is leadership located? And I do not.
So is there a difference between?
Well, I don't make it synonymous. I don't think leadership and power are synonymous.
Okay, so piece that out for me.
Power and leadership are exactly the same thing.
We agree that it is not, correct?
Right.
Okay, so why not?
Oh my gosh. This is like
do
like all the time.
At lunch. So anytime you're in Omaha, come up here.
So why are leadership and power not synonymous? Or why are they different?
Or that mean they could
Those are
be,
two
they
different
have
questions.
similarities, but I don't think they're synonymous.
Okay, you start.
Okay, so I think what we have to do first is agree what we think power is, right?
Okay.
Okay, so what's power? We could talk about French and Raven's definition. Legitimate, referent.
Oh, right. Do we know all of those?
What's the other two?
Yeah,
Legitimate, referent. Positional.
Yeah.
And there's one more. Anyway, okay, so there's, so when we talk about those 3 or 4 aspects, Raven's actually, I think, gone 2 more, which are escaping me at the moment, but none of those descriptions match what we talk about with leadership.
Yeah. So why are they different?
Mhm.
Oh, that's a hard question.
It is a hard question.
That was like my question the other day. What's the difference between bad leadership and toxic leadership?
That's a good question.
Stumped me too. Yet I know that I feel that power and leadership are not synonymous. So how can I articulate that? I don't know.
Seems like power is Can you explain that? Power has multiple sources, like
Mhm.
French and Raven would argue, or Raven would argue.
Mhm.
Whereas, and you use it to get something done
Mhm.
in a variety of ways. And it can be positive use and it can have toxic use,
Yes.
right?
And
So
leadership can be defined as mobilizing others into action.
exactly, which is mobilization may or may not be a type of power in the moment.
True. Oh, now we've stumped ourselves. This was not part of the questions
This is a
that
candidacy question. No, it's not. We'll just leave that idea out there.
Yeah, we're
for
just gonna let
people
that
to
one
ponder.
float.
Exactly. Okay, well, we talked about number two, but
Mhm.
number two was, what does interdisciplinary leadership mean?
Mhm.
Okay. What do you see as the main differences between interdisciplinary leadership and other emergent leadership models, such as collaborative leadership or shared leadership?
So it was interesting. We had a dissertation the other day that talked about these different emergent models of leadership, like collaborative and shared. And it's certainly, and I asked that same question of the student. And I think shared and collaborative leadership you can have, and we talk about this in the paper, where we talk about you can use interdisciplinary practices in nursing leadership, like a program that is like executive nursing leadership, or would we use executive business leadership? Like there's certainly graduate programs out there that have all of the same folks together, education leadership. And you can have that in a shared leadership approach where you have all of the like-minded, homogeneous group of people coming together and we're sharing leadership, right? What I think interdisciplinary adds that layer on to make it unique in that way to try to address the wicked problems that we're talking about, the complex role problems that we're talking about. I think it adds another layer onto shared and collaborative that kind of put together people from diverse groups, whether it's the different the different sectors of public sector, private sector, education, different institutions coming together, or whether it's like what we do is bring cohorts together, individuals from different disciplines together into a cohort model, and brings that other level of, okay, we're all accountable, and in our cohort model, we're all accountable, helping each other learn. That's what the discussion board is about. We want to bring our best selves to the discussion board because we are all trying to help challenge and advance each other's thinking. So we ask each other questions on the discussion board, but we're all coming from those different disciplines. So we're doing shared leadership. We're collaborating. You had to do that 801 project where you had to do the poster together, right? Y'all remember that? I see shaking heads that are like, yeah, I remember that. But I think the interdisciplinary leadership adds that other level of complexity to it when you have to come together and dialogue with people who have different theoretical, practical, experientially based ideas, perspectives, yeah, that have to come, that get invited to come together. So we're framing things in a positive way.
Exactly.
That have to come together because we're forward. That get to have the opportunity to come together in a unique way, I think.
Because we believe those kinds of wicked problems are going to require multiple perspectives to solve. So having some practice with that, some exploration with it, prepares you in a different way when you leave this program than perhaps other programs would, or approaches. Okay, we touched on this, but There are more leadership programs than ever before. So why is interdisciplinary leadership important, and what makes our program unique in how we practice it? Kind of touched
We
on
touched
that,
on some of it. We talked about cohort model, and refer now to the paper. Oh yeah, one of our did we talk about it this morning a little bit in the writing workshop? Yeah, we talked about it a little bit when we were doing the writing session when I was with you. Is reflectivity, the reflective practice piece, and I think that is certainly a unique aspect to our program as an interdisciplinary program, but also as the Jesuit program. So that reflective piece, the cohort piece, great faculty, like, certainly makes us unique. What else? All of our students are adulting, minimally. You know, like we're all trying to adult, right? But we have experience, we have life experience, right? Whereas you might find another, like there's undergraduate leadership programs, right, at a lot of universities now. And they may not have the outside world experience or been able to adult for as long that we know all of our students have. And we try to honor that by a lot of the discussion boards that invite you to bring in your experience, to then connect it to reflect on it and connect it to the learning, to the scholarly sources that you're looking at.
Paper topics.
Paper topic, yeah. So I think those are unique elements to I think our interdisciplinary leadership program, that I believe set us apart. But also I hope prepare our students well for what Creighton mission is. Like, you'll set the world on fire and try to address the social justice issues that are out there, address the complexity of those wicked problems that we all know that we need to address. So,
Well done.
does that do it?
That's our list of questions.
So, how much time do we have?
It's 6 till 8.
So I get to ask all those questions back now? No. We can take questions from,
Yeah, I think that would
the folks. What? Yes, please.
be. Yeah, question. Woo-hoo.
So based on your experience with your help and the students, you had an interdisciplinary, complex group of people.
Mhm.
So in that situation, what were the effective strategies for channels of communication to fill in those knowledge gaps? And then what were some that you would say, gosh, I wish we did do it that way?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And communication is someone's expertise, but as an experience base, so I'm not familiar with the theories of it.
Candace, you repeat the question.
Oh, okay. What the question that I'm going to answer is what modes of communication? I'm going to go with modes. What modes of communication were most effective, and which ones were not when we're working with multiple partners in an interdisciplinary model? So we found through practice that the modes of communication that worked best, especially as health educators to school, were face-to-face. I could not get teachers are busy folks, principals are busy folks, so we had to go back to original communication, talking to people face-to-face. Emails were difficult to do. You couldn't get a person on the phone to save your life because they're busy at school all day. Whereas we're all just sitting in the office going, we really wish people were healthier, and so we're just like, go get out there. And so
Access is one issue.
I rode my bike a lot.
Okay.
With the industry partners, it was just finding the right person within the chain of their organization that was the right one to communicate with, and then you had a friend for life kind of thing. So so getting there, and then trying to keep it so and this is what I find with the dissertations as well. So we talk about interdisciplinary as holding the complexity for as long as you can, but then you have to, at some point, we were talking about this a little bit, Erin, is scoping. You know, you still have to find, find something that's realistic. And so in line with communication, it was also holding complexity, but what's the next most important step in communicating that one next? You know, we all had the vision. It was then, okay, now what? And just let me concentrate on that, you know, especially for the schools. And for us at times as health educators and public health nurses who had other responsibilities to the community, it was, okay, this is the next thing that we're going to do. So recognizing and honoring the complexity, but then keeping it simple and simple communication and keeping those goals in mind. So both finding the right mode and then communicating as clearly as you can on the next most important step.
The research that I've participated in with regards to interorganizational collaboration, which is exactly what that project was, where you have multiple organizations represented in a project, is first of all, as Candace mentioned, try as much as possible to send the same representative every time. Because if you send multiple people, and we're all busy, right? And sometimes you send a delegate, a representative, that person essentially changes the whole dynamic of the group you have. You become a new zero history group. You have to start over. So very basic things like send the same person every time. If you don't send the same person every time, make sure everybody gets introduced again, because you're going to have to compress that team building groupiness feeling. You have to reestablish that every time when you have a new person there. So some very basic kinds of strategies. The other aspect that we learned was repetitiveness or redundancy can be a good thing. Sometimes you feel like, well, I just sent that same message 10 days ago or whatever, but having it come back around, restate the time and place that you're meeting, restate who's going to be involved at this particular stage is important in terms of moving the project ahead. So.
Hey, we were doing those things. So we had a representative from the health region at each of the schools, and they knew who that person was. So we were keeping that consistent. And yeah, we recruited ourselves a lot.
And you said your industry people became that friend for life.
Yeah.
It's that same person.
That same person. Yeah, once we found that, right? Hey, we were doing that. Didn't know that. Good.
I think you would have found if you were not doing that you would have really struggled for success.
Yeah. Is there chat questions?
Nope.
What are those chat things? Chris just
Did the
said some.
people who attended the writing workshop get new Creighton water bottles? That was from Chris
Oh,
Wright.
sorry, Chris.
Are they
Yes,
new?
Chris.
Sorry, hyper observant. I just couldn't help myself. So, hello there.
Hello.
Oh, they're nice.
Yeah.
Thank Monica.
They're brand new. You're the first to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Other questions?
Yes.
So I find that a lot of times with the interdisciplinary teams, it can be hard for them to keep their momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And they can sort of fall apart. I know we, within our organization, have had kind of these big topics that we've been struggling with for 10 years. Someone new comes in and realizes it's an issue, and we cycle back, but don't make progress. So I'm just curious, either through experience or research, what you guys have seen as far as momentum, sort of keeping the team together and working.
One strategy I would, oh, sorry, the question that I'm going to answer is how do you maintain momentum in, particularly in long-term projects, such as the one that she participated in. One strategy that probably won't surprise you given the backgrounds that you have is having a champion for the area. Because we do want to distribute the power, you want to distribute the responsibilities of the group, but it still needs to be somebody with some energy for that particular topic to keep putting it back on the agenda. And hopefully you bring people along with you to do that, but if there's no one championing it, it's going to lose momentum over time. That'd be one recommendation.
Yeah, and one part that I didn't mention about our Health Promoting Schools project was that it was funded by the Public Health Agency of Canada for the first part of it, and so you kind of had to, it's, it was Public Health Agency funded grant, and so we were kind of beholden to it for the first few years, but then you kind of got going, and the health region took it on as, and the manager of our department took it on as the champion, and others like some of the superintendents in the area really saw it as part of their initiative. So yeah, that certainly happened for us, but also find a backer and they'll hold you to it, hold your feet. And that's the accountability part as well. Other than that, momentum, part of it was, you asked about measurement, how, evaluating anything. And so I went into doing health promotion work right after my PhD. So I was like, research on the brain, and it's not as common out there, as you all know. And so, but I find that having an evaluative aspect and about or an assessment, if you want to use that phrase as well, an assessment aspect, keeps that feedback loop coming. And as we were drawing the other day, I like circles.
I like spheres.
Those circles of the feedback loop kind of can help keep the momentum going. But if you have a non-circle without a assessment component where you're feeding back that information and checking in on yourself, it kind of, you lose the, hey, we did something. So you need the, hey, we did something. How did it go? What was successful about it? What was like, oh, here's how we can do it again. That keeps that feedback loop going, which then keeps the momentum up, I find.
And promoting the success.
Yes.
Because, like you said, hey, we achieved something. Present that to various audiences. That brings some energy to it also, because it's not just recognition of the project, but also of the people involved, and the outcomes are beneficial to the groups that you're working with. That all builds energy that reinvests itself in the project.
And like when I'm talking assessment or evaluation, it's tell the story of what's going on. It can be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be counting widgets. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. There are many types of evidence of.
But you want to tell the story of the widgets, so it's a combination.
Yeah.
Yeah. No chat questions?
Somebody's commenting on our fire? I can see that there's chat stuff going on.
There are.
But it's not about that. Great.
Okay. It seems that at different periods of time in history that the interdisciplinary nature has been a part of a big project or a social issue or something. Why now? Why here? What is sort of that renewed interest in the recognition of interdisciplinary leadership in particular as this is something we're paying attention to and listening to and utilizing in our practice?
So the question is, why interdisciplinary leadership now when it's come up before? I'm not sure it's come up before that much, unless you have an example.
I think of, and maybe I'm thinking very broadly.
Okay.
I think of, when people, why it's coming to mind, but you tell me how. There were many different disciplines involved in creating that type of a weapon.
Okay.
I think looking at issues like immigration, which is huge.
Right.
And other kinds of, those are just two that are kind of coming to mind that I think require that interdisciplinary thinking to work through, as you're referring to, those complex problems. And it's not just in the last year or 5 years. I mean, this is time, so that's a Is there a cyclical nature? Is it just more complex now?
her question is, again, why interdisciplinary leadership and why now? Given that historically we've had other projects that required multiple disciplines to answer the question. Is that fair?
Can you share some of the,
The examples were building the atomic bomb. Immigration is an issue now, but it's been an issue for a long time. We've had public health issues for a long time. Those are the ones that come to mind immediately. I would argue that yes, that happened. We didn't examine it as an interdisciplinary leadership issue. Let's use the atomic bomb as an example. So they're building those bombs. They're designing them between, I think they started working on it maybe in the 1930s. And that really, of course, we're looking at through the World War II and after that, right? The leadership models at the time were twofold. Great man theory, particularly great white men theory. And the other one was, just went out of my head. Oh, the management style, the very top down, is it Taylor or Weber? I always forget. I think it's Taylor. Scientific management, right? The theoretical perspectives we used at the time did not recognize that interdisciplinarity aspect of those kinds of problems. I think they just did it because that's what they saw needed to be done, not because somebody thought, if we came at this from an interdisciplinary leadership perspective, we might have better luck, kind of thing. So in a way it's cyclical, but I think it's more a function of that we're looking at it now because we have a better understanding of leadership process. Agree, disagree?
Yeah, I mean,
And?
yeah, I would say that it wasn't that we weren't doing interdisciplinarity before. It's that we are acknowledging that is what we're doing now. And I would argue, because we argue.
We argue in the best sense.
I would argue that we still have work to do on bringing the disciplines together, because I would say that the creation of the atomic bomb forgot one discipline: ethics. That would have been nice. Now, should we use it? That would have been helpful at the time. Or should we keep working on it? Should we ever bring this into existence? Didn't have that person on the team at the time. Possibly.
I think we're doing a little better job of that,
I hope
at
so.
least in some aspects when we look at development of artificial intelligence. There are ethicists examining it as we develop that kind of technology differently than in the 30s and 40s.
Yep. So I think we're continuing to, I mean, and this is common across a lot of phenomenon, is when we name it, we can start doing it better. We can say, they may not have, I don't know if the term interdisciplinary was in common parlance at that time, but we're naming it now. And part of it is that the university, higher ed, is allowing those structures to play a little bit more. And so you're going to see that happening.
There's much more emphasis on interdisciplinary programs. I mean, Creighton alone has a handful of interdisciplinary programs per se. We're one of them. I think that universities as a whole, not 100%, but as a whole are making efforts to break down silos. We're trained in specific ways to look at problems in particular ways, very specialized, very in-depth in particular areas. And I think there's a growing recognition we need to be looking across areas. So some of it is an historical artifact that I think shifting.
Yeah, and I don't know that that higher ed is leading it. It's because they were already doing it, and we're doing it a lot in communities in the world. Like, I was doing that health promoting schools project before I knew that the interdisciplinary leadership program at Creighton University existed, right? So it's going on out there. Universities are seeing that it's going on, so they're kind of naming it and studying it and trying to do it even more and better. And so you got the magic going on. Who wore it best? I don't know. Like, is our universities doing it best, or is our communities and other, what do they call it? Enterprising, entrepreneurial startups. Are they doing it? They are doing it well. They're making a lot of money off of it. So I think it's as we know, knowledge is accelerating. So I think we're always trying to keep up at this point.
I think that healthcare is probably one of the big drivers of it, because there's simply so much to know that now that no one specialty can claim it knows everything about everything regarding a particular healthcare problem. And because of that, it's still taking time to catch hold across healthcare, but they're making advances in that set of disciplines, in recognizing that they've got to have a team to solve these problems. There's simply too much to know for anyone disciplined to claim they have it all.
Well, yeah. So healthcare, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Education's doing pretty darn good. They've recognized that at some point, no single teacher can like early K to 8-ish, K to 6 now, that you have your generalist teachers. So they've known that nobody can hold all of that knowledge, but they're also recognizing that they're creating citizens that are critical thinkers. Like they're learning how to learn.
Because nobody can know it all.
Yes. Yeah.
And compared to 700 AD, you might have been able to know the sum total of
What was
knowledge
written
at the time. What was written. Yeah, exactly. But no.
Yeah.
Shannon wanted to note that, Deb, your hair has only been on fire part of the time.
Oh, thank you. Put water on it. Is it because I keep going like this, too far over?
Yeah.
Who else is with us?
Hi, this is Laura Steele. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Oh, good. Well, I was kind of wondering too, the dialogue just now is really interesting to me, because I think something too that I think maybe is, I don't know if this is ancient or if this is new, maybe you can tell me, but I feel like maybe that we as a society are also coming into an understanding that humans and leaders kind of operate with a mind, body, spirit in a sense, and that those things can't be severed from each other. I think we tried to for a while, but we have evolutionary biological things that drive the ways that we view the world. We tend to, for example, we tend to scan for threat. And so how you then use your psychological mindset to then view the world differently. So I find that part fascinating. And I wonder if you think that there's been a similar shift from your perspective in seeing that when we deal with people, we're having to deal with them more holistically maybe than we've considered in the past.
I think that's a good point. I think that generally that we're looking at things more holistically than we used to. We'd say, there's still a long ways to go, but I think that we're seeing, if you look at philosophy of disciplines across the board, I think you're seeing less emphasis on what we call reductionism, to bring it all the way down to the smallest point, and then by the time you're down to the smallest point, you've left so much stuff out of whatever the particular concept is that it has lost its meaningfulness. And that recognition of how things are actually part of a bigger whole, that I think we've really started to see a shift since the early 80s, maybe late 70s, early 80s. It still has a long way to go, but oh, great, that's where she's gonna go with this.
I'm still 39.
I am not. That's all I will say. Because you started to see authors like Friedrich Capra, and I think his name is Varela. And Kenneth Boulding was writing in the 70s about systems thinking. But much before that, you don't see philosophically those a heavy emphasis on those kinds of integrated ways of thinking.
Not in the social sciences, but you still saw that in the humanities.
In the humanities, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because in the humanities, you contextualize much more, and you use the situatedness of the existence a little bit more. And with interdisciplinarity, you get to look at the situatedness, look at the experiential, look at the intuitive, look at the conceptual all together. Hopefully, in some ways, it's difficult, but like there's pockets of it. I would say there's pockets of it. We still can't. We still, when we're tired and want to hit the easy button, we may, like, there are situations where we go, let's reduce that down to the most simple widget that we can measure, you know, and that's what I was saying about the dissertation. You have to hold the complexity for as long as you can and then scope it into something that's researchable.
Well, and realize that you can do more projects later.
Yes, and that it takes more than the one. Right, and that's where we do need to honor the intuitive, the experiential, the conceptual, the theoretical, the methodological, all together, and that's mind, body, spirit expressions. Trying to hold them all of the time is that's, I don't think, possible, but to recognize when we are not. Recognizing what we have left out, like the atomic bomb situation is like, was everybody at the table that needed to be there, and either intentionally leave somebody out, or know that you have, or so that you're not just making another mistake, you know, if you want to call that a mistake or not. So yeah, I think like you said, we're bringing ethicists and philosophers and historians and political scientists. Hey, Jim, you know, I don't think he's on tonight.
He said he would watch
into the conversation, so that we have those perspectives that bring in a different, like, I was trained in kinesiology, body, and psychology, not necessarily all of the other pieces, right? So we have our own perspectives. So I think we're doing better.
I think we have a long ways to go. I don't think I can't imagine that there's a final answer, because there's so many perspectives that any combination of people that you put together, you're going to come up with new questions. So
yeah, that was the part of the paper that we had to take out.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? Because for edit for length. What was the thing that we did? When the question is not the final answer or something like that.
Yeah.
It was a great heading. I had to cut it.
We'll get back to it.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question from Nancy Foster.
Who's sitting in the hotel here?
Yeah,
in Omaha.
she's in Omaha, in her hotel. That's okay.
That's okay.
Cozy. So has Creighton University thought about an interdisciplinary degree program to model a marriage between law and medicine, or business and law, or business and nursing? And how will this interdisciplinary degree affect leadership in industry? Well,
I believe there have been. She would have to check the law school catalog.
they do.
They do, okay. Lydia says yes.
They do.
And how will that affect?
Not so much with like law and medicine, but I know business and law and business and nursing, maybe not directly, but like nursing students are required to take like negotiation and conflict resolution courses.
Right.
The business and law degree is a dual degree where the electives overlap.
Okay.
But as having taken some of those classes with like having doctors in there or lawyers, it brings a lot of different conversation to the table,
Mhm.
which benefits everybody.
Absolutely.
Dr. Georges could tell us about psych and law together, but she may be giving baths right now.
Yeah, we have about 8
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly speak to it a little bit. My internet connection is kind of crummy. I mean, I think there are these dual training programs out there. I don't know. I've been thinking about your question, Nancy, specifically the degrees you noted, but I think what comes out of those programs, regardless of the two fields, is really the knowledge that you don't know as much about the other field and the recognition that you know who to talk to should you have those questions. So that's kind of a punt answer because I don't know if Creighton's considered some of those marriages as you noted there. Some they have, but I think just listening across the last hour or so, I think even without those dual degrees, it breeds a necessity in creating interdisciplinary teams. So you do come to the question with a different mindset or a different set of lenses. So I don't know if Creighton has, but I think it's an important thing to practice even if the degree doesn't exist.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get those babies clean. Thought you were washing babies.
I was washing babies. I got most of the babies to bed. One of them is actually so we're fine for a bit.
Other questions? Any questions that don't have anything to do with interdisciplinary leadership?
Mostly from the online folks, because we're going to see y'all tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay? Most of you tomorrow. Did you want to talk about registration? Reminder?
I just wanted to remind everybody that Shannon works with all of you on that now, so be sure to watch for emails from her if you haven't already worked with her on that.
Because we're registering for spring now.
Starting November 1st.
Starting November 1st, which is a week from tomorrow. Oh my gosh. The other thing that I would like to announce is that our next JayTalk will be on November 14th. Dr. Martin is going to be the host of that one. And the topic, let me make sure I say this correctly.
It's very specific.
Bending like a reed, not walking the tightrope, balancing work, life, and study. So 7:30 on November 14th. I wanted to wait till this was over to send out the link again, but that'll be coming out in the next few days. So keep an eye out for that.
That'd be a fireside chat or
We have to
down
ask
the
him.
river.
Down the river.
What he says bending like a reed. It should be on the river.
Floating on the river.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can see what he's comfortable with.
Can he swim?
Can he swim? That's right.
Well,
Alright.
for those folks that aren't in this room, not only do we have the fire, but we definitely have the heat. It is hot in this room for some reason. So we
It's a
have,
little sweet today. It's been really
hey, Chris.
Hello.
okay. Well, if you don't have any other questions, thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you on November 14th.
Thank you.
Okay, you're logged on, right,
Can you
Lydia? Because you're good. Don't